and increasing demand for the services we provide. In short, urban governments matter in growing this province. However, this same growth has created increasing challenges to our ability to maintain and sustain this unparalleled growth. Over the next 3 days, we will have the opportunity to learn more about these challenges as well as other issues impacting urban governments. I am extremely pleased with the successes of the past year. We concentrated our efforts on matters that are important to the urban sector and have positioned SUMA as a leader on such files as housing, recycling, and asset management. We initiated the first ever environmental forum, a formal meeting between SUMA and the Ministry of Environment to address concerns of the urban sector. We administered another year of bridge funding to urban recycling programs. We worked closely with the province and other stakeholders to deliver on a goal to have a provincial housing strategy. We have engaged members and empowered you to participate in lobbying campaigns on the multi-material recycling program. Governance issue and the Urban Highway Connector program. We implemented a comprehensive advocacy strategy which included a detailed budget submission to the provincial government on the priorities of the urban sector. We continue to offer support to members on tangible capital asset reporting, initiated the Saskatchewan Municipal Asset Management Working Group, and hosted a successful 2-day workshop on asset management that featured the innovative delivery of live webcasting. We were also engaged in 85 consultations on various matters involving legislation and programs affecting urban governments. I predict 2012 will be just as busy and successful. We have already started to map out our priorities through a renewed advocacy strategy adopted by the board in December. Going forward, our focus will include the development of a long-term sustainable infrastructure program, addressing the many challenges on the environmental front, remaining engaged in the housing issue, and preserving the principles of the municipal operating grant as it is reviewed in 2012. As stewards of our communities, it's our responsibility to ensure the long-term sustainability of services we provide, such as water, transportation, and recreation, and the public infrastructure needed to deliver those services. Much of this infrastructure is essential in order to create safe, livable, and healthy communities. It also forms the economic foundation for our communities and is extremely valuable to the future growth. Unfortunately, after many decades of chronic underfunding, that foundation on which our way of life is built upon is crumbling beneath us. For too long, urban governments in Saskatchewan were forced to allocate funding which had been intended to support infrastructure to our operations in order to make sure programs and services kept running. This decision was not easy to make, but with an estimated $565 million shortfall in operational funding from the provincial government, something had to give. Today, local councils are faced with the daunting task of renewing the aging infrastructure and building new to address current and future growth. It is not all doom and gloom, however. Urban councils have received funding from the federal and provincial governments. In the last 4 years, $750 million has been invested in Saskatchewan. Most of this funding has been delivered by the federal gas tax program, the economic stimulus program, and the Building Canada Fund. In addition, the province has invested its own funds through the Municipal Economic Enhancement Program and low-interest loans via the Saskatchewan Infrastructure Growth Initiative. This is welcome funding, and it has helped, but it is not nearly sufficient to really tackle the infrastructure challenge we face. Preliminary calculations have estimated that an annual investment of nearly $400 million is needed to manage the urban infrastructure situation in this province. The answer to this problem is not additional ad hoc infrastructure grants. Instead, we need a strategic response that is based on fact and that will provide a long-term, predictable, and sustainable solution. The need to create such a program has been acknowledged by both SUMA and the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. So in partnership with the city sector, 3 research projects have been initiated to develop the evidence-based argument for a Made in Saskatchewan infrastructure program. 2 of the 3 have been completed and have provided data on infrastructure financing alternatives and best practices for infrastructure investment. The final project is focused on defining the gap in infrastructure funding in Saskatchewan. This will be a longer process that will evaluate the infrastructure in various municipalities and provide an estimated number for investment. The project partners hope to have a long-term plan ready for the provincial cabinet's consideration in late 2012. Until such time as the program is developed and implemented, our urban infrastructure will continue to degrade and the need for new infrastructure will continue to grow. With this in mind, SUMA has called upon the Government of Saskatchewan to implement an interim program similar to the MEEP program introduced in 2009. We are asking for an investment of $200 million to support urban infrastructure in this next provincial budget. The act of addressing the infrastructure challenge goes beyond the simple investment of more dollars. Urban governments also need to recognize that as stewards of these assets, we need to properly manage them for future generations. This means urban governments from the smallest village to largest city need to educate themselves on the principles of asset management and seriously look at implementing strategies to plan for the long term. In 2009, municipalities across this country were mandated to report their tangible capital assets. SUMA, in partnership with Municipal Affairs, the Government of Canada, SARM, and the New North, led a project to develop the necessary tools and resources to help Saskatchewan municipalities meet this obligation. In 2010, the compliance rate for urban governments that have submitted financial statements is 95%. This is a remarkable showing for the urban sector. The information collected by the TCA reporting process will form the foundation to move into asset management. Some urban governments in Saskatchewan have already started this and have come to realize the benefit of planning for infrastructure. These councils now understand what the true life cycle cost of an asset is, and they are starting to have the important conversations around the council chamber about infrastructure priorities and levels of service. The interest in asset management from urban governments is growing. SUMA wants to keep this momentum going and has spearheaded the creation of the Saskatchewan Municipal Asset Management Working Group. This group of elected and non-elected officials has become a champion for asset management. Its members are excited about growing the knowledge base in Saskatchewan. If you are interested in learning more about asset management, I would encourage you to attend the education session this afternoon. Much of the infrastructure in our communities is built to provide services to our members, to ensure their health and well-being, and to protect the environment we live in. With the increase in population, development, and industry the booming economy has generated, urban governments have increasingly become the frontline service providers in protecting our environment from any potential negative impacts caused by this growth. Urban governments provide their citizens with safe and clean drinking water, systems to handle wastewater, options for the recycling and disposal of solid waste. However, since all of these services are regulated by the federal and provincial governments, we are frequently placed at the mercy of any regulations these orders of government impose on our operations. Urban governments support many of these improvements, and we understand the value in protecting our environment and citizens from potential risks. Unfortunately, the challenge for local governments lies in compliance with these regulations, since they generally are extremely expensive to implement. SUMA has been actively involved in several consultations about changes to water and wastewater treatment, new solid waste regulations, and the introduction of a multi-material recycling program. We repeatedly communicate the need to examine the impact of proposed regulations before any changes are enacted. We have seen the trend every year that urban governments are required to follow higher standards in every municipal operation, of which environment is just one example. SUMA has consistently communicated to the Minister of Environment that these proposed changes will significantly impact urban governments financially, with the primary financial tool available to pay for the improvements needed to comply being the property tax. The sector has little capacity to adhere to these regulations if no new funds are made available to assist in the implementation. SUMA has repeatedly heard from the Ministry of Environment that the ministry is a regulatory body which does not have the authority to appropriate funds for any newly created regulations. The decision to designate funds occurs through a separate government process. Urban governments find this structure problematic, as it often leads to regulation without funding, and the impact is ultimately felt by the local taxpayers. The provincial government must alter this process and ensure that regulation and funding decisions follow a parallel process. SUMA continues to work with the Ministry of Environment on a multi-material recycling program, or MMRP, a process which has been underway since 2005. While a lot of progress has been made, we are not moving fast enough. We hope that the MMRP will be fully implemented in 2012. SUMA will be pushing hard for this to occur, as our members have been waiting long enough for a recycling program in this province. Should we experience another delay in the implementation, SUMA will ask the Government of Saskatchewan to extend the current municipal bridge funding program to 2013 or until the MMRP begins. $500,000 will be requested to cover the rising costs of recycling. The bridge funding program is vital to the continuation of urban recycling programs in Saskatchewan. Past investments have had some significant tangible results. Urbans recycled nearly 37,000 metric tons of paper cardboard in the program's 3 years. That's the equivalent to the weight of 8 naval ships like the HMCS Regina, a sizable impact. Much of this recycling activity would be at risk without the direct support of the provincial government. Last year, one of Convention's hot topics was housing in urban centers. This is not a local government responsibility. However, our communities bear the social and economic consequences of an insufficient and overly expensive housing stock. SUMA members identified this as a key priority, and SUMA answered the call. SUMA immediately called upon the provincial government to develop a housing strategy, and it was delivered early this year. From the time building relationships within the housing arena began, including the province and private sector, SUMA has played a leadership role. We were involved in planning the first annual Housing Summit in Saskatoon last year, and we stand on the steering committee for the second Housing Summit to be held in Regina this April. We see immense value in being engaged in the housing file and in working with partners toward effective solutions to Saskatchewan's housing problem. The housing issue is complex, involving more than just affordability. The stock of housing available is a crucial element. There are too few rentals and too few entry-level homes. The solution is not simply more government intervention. The private sector must play a part. developers must begin to construct the right housing units for the market. Government can create the environment, providing incentives to support developers, removing impediments to private investment, and supporting housing development through regulations. This means urban governments must have local or regional planning services that provide consistency and clarity to land use planning decisions. Official community plans are a must for urbans, and these OCPs have to include housing plans. It means working with local and regional developers and businesses to complete a market assessment relating to current and future housing needs. In addition, urban Saskatchewan, the provincial government, and the private sector must collectively lobby the federal government to create a tax and regulation regime to encourage investment in rental properties and the creation of capital pools. Federal leadership, similar to that shown in the creation of the old multi-unit residential buildings program, is what is needed. The implementation of the municipal operating grant in 2009 marked the beginning of a new relationship between the government of Saskatchewan and local governments. This access to a long-term, predictable, and unconditional operating grant was very welcome news. The MOG was designed to fund the provincial interest in municipal operations such as economic development, recreation, transportation, and community development. It was not intended to build or replace critical infrastructure. In 2011, we received the equivalent to 1 full point of PST, a substantial increase in funding to local governments. In the 2012-13 budget, we expect the government to continue to fund this program to the 1 full point of PST based on the revenue from the 2010-2011 fiscal year. This year will, however, bring some change, as SUMA expects municipal affairs to use the soon-to-be-released 2011 census population figures. While we expect the overall pool to grow by 9%, the grant to your communities will depend on your growth relative to the average growth in your pool. This year also marks the first review of the program since it was created. SUMA is interested in exploring options related to how the money will be distributed to local governments in the coming years. Currently, there are 4 pools: cities, urban, rural, and northern. Each pool receives a different percentage of the overall funds: 46% to cities, 18% to towns, villages, and resort villages, 29% to rural municipalities, and 7% for northern municipalities. Finding a fair and equitable mix will be one of the big challenges of 2012. Addressing all of these issues I have identified so far will not be easy, and as fantastic as your SUMA staff and board are, we cannot meet these challenges alone. Meeting our collective goals requires that every member government of SUMA speak with one voice. So, as your president, I'm asking that you meet with your local MLAs and MPs regularly, tell them the story of your community, bring our issues, infrastructure, recycling, and housing to life. Let these provincial and federal decision makers know that urban Saskatchewan really does matter. If you need help in setting up these meetings or preparing for them, our policy staff here in Regina is always ready to take your call and provide assistance. As you lobby locally, we will be ever vigilant in lobbying provincially. Together, we will advance the issues that matter to our citizens, and we will speak with one voice that will not be silenced. SUMA, of course, does much more than advocate for urban governments. We also supply a number of services to our members. This year marks the 40th anniversary for SUMA's Group Benefits Program. This is a valuable service to our members, which provides many small urban governments the ability to provide health benefits to their staff. We have always been and will continue to be competitive and provide outstanding customer service to those local governments that take advantage of this program. We are also involved in the SUMA Assure program, Following possibly one of the worst years for the insurance industry in Saskatchewan, SUMA Assure remains healthy and strong. This year, the program boasted a small profit for subscribers and saw a membership increase with the addition of 7 new subscribers, including 1 city. The SUMA Advantage program is also performing exceptionally well and has introduced a couple of new partners. Due to a change in marketing strategy, we have realized an increase in the number of inquiries from members for the various services our partners provide. The SUMA Advantage program is an excellent way for members to save valuable dollars for their communities. SUMA has enjoyed an outstanding year and aims to achieve even more for urban governments in 2012. I would like to close on a personal note. I will not be seeking re-election this fall, and as such, this will be my final convention as president and as a SUMA member. I have enjoyed being a part of SUMA for the past 8 years, serving in the position of Vice President of Towns and as President. During my tenure on the SUMA board, a number of important initiatives have been implemented that have had a positive impact on urban governments. The implementation of the federal gas tax program recognized the need for long-term, predictable, and stable funding to local governments engaging in environmentally sustainable infrastructure projects. We saw the GST paid for providing municipal services and community infrastructure fully rebated, returning millions of dollars back to local governments. The Municipal Operating Grant was established in 2009, officially ending years of ad hoc operational funding to local governments. This program has put in place a sustainable and predictable funding mechanism for our local governments. The Municipal Economic Enhancement Program was announced at the 2009 convention. This initiative resulted in the startup of many critical infrastructure projects, and was an extremely successful program. Urban councils were extremely pleased to see their infrastructure needs recognized with $100 million in unconditional funding. We have seen SUMA develop a strong and healthy government-to-government relationship with the province of Saskatchewan. The rapport that exists between our members and staff with provincial officials has allowed for a number of important projects to go ahead and a greater understanding of the interests of each side. As a member of the SUMA board, I have had the opportunity to travel throughout the province to meet with many of you. With every stop I make, I am reminded of the passion and dedication you each have for your communities. I've made a lot of friends during this time, and I have enjoyed every moment we have spent together at regional meetings, annual conventions, and SUMA golf tournaments. I look forward to continuing to represent your interests for the next coming months as your president. I want to thank the board of directors and executive, past and present, for their commitment to SUMA. I've been impressed with the caliber of directors we have. Each one works extremely hard to advance the interests of urban government. They have been an excellent team to work with and have been very supportive during my term as president. I'm also grateful for the assistance and guidance I have received from the SUMA staff over the years. Their commitment and professionalism has helped SUMA grow and mature, and has made a number of ideas and initiatives come alive. And to all SUMA members, thank you for your support, for being a part of SUMA, and for dedicating the time you do to your local government, and for being leaders in providing safe, healthy, livable communities